God, guns, and freedom is what America was founded on, but not the Catholic Church. So here's the thing. So a lot of the arguments I heard about for why Catholics should support gun rights American is because of the American Constitution, how it's one of the rights and liberties enshrined in the American Constitution, about how people need to have a right to defend themselves and defend their families and keep them safe. Yes, it's true that we need to have a right to keep ourselves safe. It is true that we need to have that we have an obligation to keep people safe in society. How that manifests itself in each society may, can, and should be different depending on situation and culture. So in Canada, we actually do not have where I live. Canada is where I live. For in case of you who aren't aware, we do not have a historic gun culture like in the United States. There are certain areas that are more gun friendly than others, notably the province of Alberta, as some of the highest support for quote unquote gun rights in the country. That being said, even there, it only goes as high as 25% of the population support relaxing gun laws. Most of the country of Canada wants even stricter gun laws, myself included. And for our culture and our society, I agree. I think it helps. So this does not mean we eliminate does not mean that we don't have any gun problems or shootings in Canada. I lived actually through my province actually in 2020 had one of the largest mass shootings in Canadian history. Or I think about 22 people were killed. Someone got a decommissioned police car, got some guns, and shot up a bunch of people. Unfortunately, that being said, in Canada, these are quite rare. And in Canada, you hear more about school stabbings than school shootings. Again, the reason, and again, there's a reason why you hear about that and why you hear about less deaths in general. It is easier to run a gun. It is easier to run a knife than a gun. Now, I'm not saying that the United States should copy Canada. I'm not saying that anyone who thinks that we should have massive gun laws is a heretic. On the contrary, I am pushing back against certain American conservatives who want to cut and paste American cultural traditions and paste it on the rest of the planet, even Canada, which is a close neighbor, and yes, admittedly culturally very similar to the United States, and just think that's fine, and if you disagree, you're not a good Catholic, because this is the cultural tradition here. We're a different culture. We're a different society with different values and customs. Furthermore, I'd want to point out that various church leaders, notably the Maronite Catholic Church in Lebanon, have called for increased gun controls, largely because and they think that the guns should be controlled of the government, notably in relation to groups like Hezbollah. And they don't want private militias taking over things there. Now, in the United States, the idea behind gun laws is basically to prevent against tyranny of the government, so that the government cannot come, round people up, and put them in prison. That is the common rhetoric. I'm not going to comment on whether or not that works. You should read into that statement as, I'm not going to comment on whether or not that works. The United States is a different culture from my own, different society from my own. There are different people there who would like to model gun laws in the United States off of Canada, basically even scrap that amendment, that amendment in that part of the Bill of Rights in the American Constitution, and just get rid of bringing Canadian-style gun laws completely. Maybe it's something they should do. Maybe it's not. They have their own traditions. They have their own ideas of what it means to be conservative. Also, there is a gun culture in the United States that is connected with traditional liberties there. And in Quas Primus, if I'm remembering the encyclical correctly, it does say that while the church does not endorse in particular system of government or culture, wherever there are traditional liberties in a particular society that have been long-standing, or the church does respect, endorse, and support that. Now, in America, it is God, guns, and freedom. Guns are a neutral thing. How you handle them depends on the culture. In Canada, we've decided as a culture, and like it or not, sorry to any American American LARPing Canadians, most Canadians, woke or not, do support the gun laws and want them to continue or even make them stricter. That is the majority opinion here. It is not part of our constitution or Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which, by the way, only came in the 1980s, to have gun laws, to have gun rights. It's not part of the tradition here. If you want that, my advice is that's okay. Consider moving to the United States. That is your right to do so. You are free to do that. I would, however, say that, but there is an obligation to keep people safe. In the United States, the idea is that if someone invades your home, you want to have a gun to protect yourself with. In Canada, we've decided that it's better just take guns out of the equation in society entirely. And most of the guns that do come into Canada come in through the poorest part of the United States. And it does seem to be working. Like whatever you. The fact of the matter is, I remember looking at the statistics a year or so ago. When 1 year, the United States had more mass shootings and gun deaths in Canada than in Canada's entire history combined. And while population is certainly a factor in that, even when you take that into consideration and did the math, we still have a lower lower death rate by guns and by gun shootings. Even in stabbings, when they do happen, that people are using knives, not guns, when these events do happen, shows you that it does work, that you aren't getting guns. Less people, from what I understand, less people seem to die. It's dangerous, it's bad, it's horrible, and it does speak to a wider problem of safety in society. That yes, you should be able to have guns in Canada, gun rights, and largely most of the deaths are more to do with bad morals rather than access to guns. To a certain extent, that's true, but like it or not, we do have a society that has gone down the toilet. When it comes to morals, respect human rights, it's become very nihilistic. It has walked far away from God in both Canada and the United States. Whatever you may like that, you may argue why it's happening, but that is the fact of the matter on the ground, and it's going to take a while, unless barring a miracle from God, may it happen, it's going to take quite a while to reverse it. So for Canada, considering we do not have that tradition in our laws and our constitution, I do support the gun laws we have in Canada. Now, why am I talk again? The reason I want to talk about this is because there are some, as I said, I mentioned this before, and I'm probably repeating myself, but there are people in the United States who act like gun laws, American-style gun laws, and American-style constitutionalism is the only form of conservatism. It's the only way of being a good Catholic faithful tradition, and if you do not support that, you are a woke lord. We have our own tradition of conservatism in Canada, and it's based more on God, king, and country rather than God, guns, and freedom. It's more of a tradition based on loyalty, respect for civic authority, and respect for the law of the land. And one of the reasons why, furthermore, one of the reasons I do not like American-style conservatism is that it tends to seep over to Canada, and it allows conservatism of any sort in Canada to be labeled as American, and as a country that was literally founded as an alternative to the United States. That is literally Canada's history. It allows the far left to take hold of the nationalist rhetoric to label any form of conservatism. I mean any form. We're not talking gun rights. We're talking I don't want to support abortion. I think it's not that great. I'm church and Catholic, of course I believe that. Or certain things, other aspects of the extreme woke agenda, which I will not mention here, but you can probably get what I'm talking about. Traditional Canadians of that tradition, I would agree with that as well, but because of American tradition seeping over the border, all conservatism in Canada gets labeled as American. and it actually hurts. It actually does. It does hurt efforts to. It does undermine Canadian grassroots efforts. It does undermine conservative Canadians from being part of the local culture and to change it from within. I personally think that Canadian conservatives and Canadian Christians, especially churchill Catholics, need to stop listening to American pundits. Personally, again, I speak as one who's a fan of many. I love Taylor Marshall's podcast on theology, not speaking about that, but I do think we need to start filtering out. Okay, this is when they're giving the Catholic faith, but we just take a step back when they talk about American culture and politics. We need to recognize that I think I believe that for Catholic traditionalism to survive in Canada, at least politically or culturally, we need to revive and revisit our own traditions. For a number of reasons, like I said, I don't mind. It lets the left take over the nationalistic rhetoric. It separates us from the wider culture and makes it difficult for us to engage certain aspects of certain ways Americans promote things don't work as well in Canada, and they don't have the same support. So, for example, I think the pro-life movement in Canada needs to do a massive rework on how it does its outreach in Canada. I think it's gone to American style, and there's a number of reasons why I think that. For example, there are no mainline pro-life politicians in Canada in any mainstream parties. None. Even Conservative Party. Period. So, how Trump was recently saying pro-life should be a state issue? In Canada, our equivalent of Donald Trump candidate would be Pierre Poilievre. He says he'll tolerate pro-life votes. He'll tolerate people to be personally pro-life, not politically pro-life in his party. That's as conservative as it gets. And I have never seen any conservative politician really do anything about the pro-life movement in Canada except take our votes. That is the reality on the ground. It's different in the United States. It's one of the areas Americans do things better, I have to admit. But that is the reality, and we have to operate in that reality. And I think by trying to simply cut and paste American tactics, American styles of doing things, simply allows the conservative politicians in Canada to take our votes, do nothing, ignore us, and allow the rest of the country to label us as Americanizing traitors. I think personally, personal opinion, I think Canadian pro-lifers should work more on activism. And not so much activism, but charity work. So do research, find alternatives to abortion for cases that are, for example, life of the mother situations. That's a situation that is neither pro-life friendly nor much of a choice. And it is something that even if you are pro-abortion, honestly, I don't know why more research is not being done to it. It's something that, by rights, neither side, if they're being honest, should be happy about. It's something that should be researched if someone's enthusiastic about it. It's something that both sides should be able to work together on, but it is simply not being done. I think that would be a great change of pace. I'd like to see more women involved in it, and I would like to see people less pushing for my right to free speech. I think the free speech movement in Canada, yes, I think even in Canada, we are getting talk about how wokeism and lack of free speech has gone too far. Happily, I agree with that. But do I think that this is going to be a stable, massive, long-term change? No. Canada is still very much a society that is still very much, certainly, I wouldn't say authoritarian like China, but it's still very much authoritarian in its culture and its history. And deference to authority is very much a Canadian thing, even now. It's not the United States, and we as pro-lifers do need to prepare for that to swing back. Further, I do not think the free speech movement, at least in Canada, is gonna do a lot to help the pro-life movement and end abortion. So, for example, I believe conservatives will allow pro-lifers to complain about how they don't like abortion laws, but they will also fight tooth and nail to keep abortion on the books in Canada. And a different cultural situation in the United States. And I think that we need, as Canadians, need to address that reality as traditional Catholics in Canada and honestly throughout the world. I love the work that American traditional Catholics do. They're some of the best when it comes to making, especially English language speaking world, English Anglosphere, talking about apologetics, the Catholic faith. They're open about their faith and does a lot of good. And they are actually doing a lot to bring about pro-life laws in Canada. That being said, some of their cultural traditions do not transfer, notably gun rights, and may even be harmful in some societies. There's certain American cultural practices that you can be a Catholic faithful tradition and completely despise them. I do not support. I do not support America. I don't support guns as a right. I'm against it 100%. There are a lot of other left wing things in Canada that I like. Again, feel free to disagree with me. You can, or just see me as a normie Canadian. I like free healthcare, and most Canadians do as well. I definitely think there are problems with the current system to make it more available, but I think making it full style American, privatized would increase access and shorten wait times for some people, yeah, but would also cut a lot of people out of access to it as well. I don't think that would work. I don't think it would work in Canada. I don't think it would be good. I think it would be quite dangerous to try. At the same time, there are a lot of good ideas the Americans do have that should be transferable and that would work. I would encourage any traditional Catholic watching this, whether you're Canadian, whether you're American, listen to the local culture around you, and I don't just mean the traditional Catholic culture. Yes, I mean the wider popular culture. Get out of the traditional Catholic bubble a little bit. If you're talking cultural change, if you're going to talk cultural change, what's on the table for cultural change in your society with regard to civil law, that is the world you need to operate in. You need to be honest about what's popular, what's not, what would work, what would not be accepted, and what is on the grounds. You also need to be aware of what the traditional Catholic faith says you should be doing. There are certain things that civil custom might say is allowed, but traditional Catholic faith says that's not allowed. For example, back to God, Guns, and Freedom. If you look at the syllabus of errors, the notion of personal religious freedom in the United States, as understood in the American Constitution and civil law, as an ideal, is completely contradictory to the faith as taught in the Catholic faith, as understood in the syllabus of errors. The Catholic faith in an ideal, perfect world should be the law of the land. I've even had some conservative Nova Scotia Americans comment down below saying they oppose Marcel Lefebvre's SSPX because their idea on religious freedom is un-American. And you know what? They're right. It's not American. It is very much against to what American culture is. And honestly, Americans need to accept that and submit to the faith. They need to work within the culture that they've got, and they need to be realistic about it. But it's not an excuse to abandon the Catholic faith any more than the fact that how in my culture being pro-life is considered to be very un-Canadian does not dispense me as a traditional Catholic from being pro-life. I may argue that we need to rethink the pro-life movement in Canada. Canada needs to drastically rethink its tactics, and I absolutely do think that. But as a law, it should be an ideal law of the land, it should not be allowed. As an ideal law of the land, we should be working to what we can in our cultural situation to limit the amount of abortions, whether that be in the American context, possibly even civil bans on it outright, which apparently do work, or in the Canadian context, where you do more support for women who are seeking abortions, more access to alternatives, arguing for alternatives to abortion. At this point in Canada, I remember contacting the local MP and local member of parliament where they're talking about taking away funding and taking away charitable status for pregnancy centers in Canada. My email to them was, okay, if I have a woman who wants to have an abortion, she wants to have an abortion, okay, I can direct her to the local abortion clinic. If she chooses she wants to have life, where am I supposed to direct her to? Where are the supports for that? How is that equitable? How is that pro-choice? If you're actually talking about the choices of women, how are we supporting the women who want that choice? Apparently, they emailed me back saying there was a huge debate in the local MP's office. And by the way, the MP in my area is a hardline liberal. It's a serious discussion, and I think that's something that pro-lifers in Canada should lean in more towards. And it's something that we can do a lot for. And honestly, I think we need to do more with practical, in Canada, we need to do a lot more with practical support. And less preaching, more talk about practical support, more talk about alternatives and access. Because honestly, a lot of, I'm pretty well aware there are a lot of people who are having access to abortion in Canada because they are afraid they'll lose their jobs. They're afraid they won't have their careers. They're afraid they won't have their supports or that the kids will live a bad life. Those are all things that, honestly, if we are talking about, even from a pro-choice position, that is not choice. That's the situation on the ground in Canada, and very little is being done about it except for a few people here and there. And raising awareness about those problems, about how these people are being abandoned, how abortion is just becoming the default for not care, and as an alternative to not caring about others, should be raised. Same thing with euthanasia. There have absolutely been cases in Canada where people have been directed to euthanasia because the government can't be bothered. And we know it because even Justin Trudeau has commented on how euthanasia laws in Canada are being abused. Yes, you heard me right. I did not misspeak. I said Justin Trudeau. The woke dream of wokeists everywhere thinks that euthanasia laws in Canada have gone overboard and are being abused and something that needs to be done about that. Which, by the way, opponents of euthanasia in Canada said that's exactly what would happen. It's happened more than once. I'm aware of people, I've spoken to people who have been pressured by people in hospitals to pull the plug on their family members and being told they were selfish for wanting to keep their family members alive. That's something in Pro-Life Canada, which, by the way, pro-life in Canada, the pro-life movement when it comes to pro-life movement in Canada when it comes to euthanasia is a glorified email list. I know I'm on the email list, and that's all it does. I'm not aware of any rallies that have been done anywhere. I'm not aware of any activism except for an interview here, an interview there. And this thing that should, and you can't say it's not going to affect me. Like, I'm a person who was born with learning disabilities. I have clinical depression. I do worry that I might, when I'm sick and old, be pressured into euthanasia because the government wants to save a few bucks. That is something I am genuinely worried about. And it's something that, honestly, most Canadians, at least for now, agree should not happen. That being said, even the conservative movement in Canada is not Christian. I've heard people who are conservative, supposedly traditional Catholic, tell me that old people are selfish for wanting to live. Yeah, that's not very pro-life. It's a different situation. All the political movements in Canada are not Christian. That's the reality, and honestly, I think that I think across the globe, especially in Canada, things need to change. We need to look more to the Catholic faith. This video is started titling it "God, Guns, and Freedom and Traditional Catholicism," because a lot of people want to take American culture and just transfer it elsewhere and think it'll work, it'll be better, people's lives will be much more free, people's lives will be much more happy, it'll just work, it'll be much more even traditional Catholic, full on. I'm telling you that's not going to work. I'm telling you that it delegitimizes other voices in Catholic tradition who know the culture better. I'm telling you, it needlessly alienates people in the local culture, from traditional Catholicism, when there are other paths to be taken. I'm arguing that if it were tried, it would in many cases make things less pro-life. There's a very real possibility it'll make things less traditional Catholic, and honestly, even if things are more free, that freedom may not necessarily be in line with the Catholic faith. Which, honestly, if your identity is first freedom, and that's your great ideal, that's classical liberalism, that comes from Freemasonry. that is not a traditional Catholic absolute ideal in of itself. You need to study the Catholic faith more. That said, there are things in American culture that are great that work well in America, and American traditional Catholics should work well within their own culture. But before they start commenting on other cultures and telling other Canadian cultures how they should change, especially when what they're recommending is how things are done in the United States, they should very much take a pause, because they are talking about a society and a cultural context that they know little to nothing about. Anyway, God bless. If there's an SSPX chapel near you, go look it up. If you don't got one in your area, try to invite one in. Please pray the rosary every day. Please say a few Hail Marys for me. And whatever your country or whatever culture you're in, try to share traditional Catholicism in your day. And just as curious, comment down below. Tell me what country you're in. Tell me what seems to work or does not work. And if you ever had experiences where someone who is traditional Catholic from another country recommended something about how things should be done in your country, and you just thought, my gosh, even if they're right, it's just not going to work. Because I'm sure there are people who've been in this situation other than me. Anyway, God bless.